In recent years, it's become more commonplace to find help and understanding when it comes to mental health awareness than it was in years past. And while this has made life easier for those with ailments to their mental health, there are still misconceptions and stigma surrounding mental health awareness running rampant through our society. And that's the topic for this episode of our mental health awareness series, Breaking the Silence.
Mental health stigma is the attitudes, the beliefs, the philosophies that specifically in mental health, that somebody who is struggling with a mental health issue is somehow defective, or somehow they have chosen this versus seeing it as truly a medical condition. And it will manifest itself in so many ways, the stigma will. It can oftentimes prevent an individual who has a mental health diagnosis from being able to gain employment. It can impact their housing situations. It can even impact their access to medical care. That stigma can be so pervasive that an individual who has either talked about their mental health journey or has had a significant mental health incident, it can really impact them throughout their life and their livelihood. So stigma reduction is one of the key things that communities can do to help reduce, ultimately, suicidal ideation. Some of the common myths and misconceptions about mental health, first of all, that one of the myths is that mental health isn't real. That it's completely made up, that individuals with mental health issues just need to suck it up, buttercup. They just need to man up, or, tighten your belt, or whatever the, ridiculous phrase is.
For example, like Robin Williams, who is a beloved actor and comedian, always had a smile on his face. Just because you look happy outside doesn't mean you're happy on the inside. And that's the thing, is people are not sensitized enough to look at the warning signs for someone who is struggling, and clearly that was a big loss to our community because we would never expect it.
As if because you can't see it, it's not real. We used to think the same thing about heart disease. We used to think the same thing about cancer, that if you couldn't physically see it, how could it possibly be real? And that's one of the biggest stigmas and stereotypes that we struggle with in mental health. Because you can't see inside a person's brain, that you assume that they're somehow, that the way they're behaving, the way they're feeling is their choice. We know scientifically that that is not the case. Nobody chooses to be depressed. Nobody chooses to be anxious. They are experiencing a feeling that's as valid as feeling pain from a broken arm, feeling the pain of a heart attack. Those are real issues and need to be treated as such and acknowledged for the reality that it is.
A lot of the things people say after losing someone to suicide is, I never knew that was going to happen. They were not that type of person. It's just because we didn't know what to look for. We didn't know how to interpret behavior or talking or just in general moods or mood changes. And one of the things that we can do to break that misconception is having that conversation with them, but also look for the signs and symptoms of somebody who is struggling. Some of the simple warning signs could be somebody who can be very happy outside and they decided to, hey, you know what, I don't need this anymore. I'm just going to give all my stuff away. Simple things like that. So, just giving away possessions because in their own minds, they don't believe that they need it anymore. It could be the littlest things as a simple comment as, hey, I just don't need to be here anymore. And that could be misinterpreted or, in so many different ways.
Stigma is a big reason why many individuals do not reach out and get help that they so desperately need. There are resources out there to help anybody with any kind of mental health issue, but the stigma that people often have about themselves, as if they're not worthy, as if they can control these feelings and emotions, kind of similar to how society views it, is oftentimes the voice that's inside somebody's head that prevents them from reaching out and asking for help.
One of the stigmas that surrounds a person from seeking help is really, it could be culturally, feeling like they don't have the resource to be able to do it. So for example, in the Asian community that I grew up in, I personally lost a brother to suicide in 2006. And one of the things in the Asian community is never talking about suicide. It was very taboo. You don't express your feelings and your sadness because it was just very frowned upon. You're supposed to be strong, you're supposed to be confident. And one of those things that because of that cultural factor, it prevented my brother from seeking help or even asking for help or in general speaking to the family about his struggles until unfortunately it was too late.
Somehow it's related to a deficit with them, like there's something wrong with them that they have control over. And so helping individuals recognize that what is happening above their neck is as important as what's happening below their neck, that physical issues are also impact mental health, and mental health impacts physical health. And so really that busting through this mind-body as if they're separate is one of the biggest stigmas that oftentimes keep people from reaching out to support and getting help when they need it. There's so many schools of thought regarding stigma nowadays, and that stigma reduction campaigns will oftentimes result in more stigma because you're bringing attention to something negative that's happening. So one of the biggest things that has happened in recent years has been the creation of mental health first aid. Mental health first aid is an amazing program because it provides that education to individuals regardless of their knowledge, skills, or abilities related to mental health. It provides a wonderful explanation and foundation. And I think once people understand what mental health is and what it's not, that goes such a long way in reducing stigma.
Training teachers, training fellow employees. One of the things that the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention offers is on-site training and just kind of general information about what we offer as our organization. So for example, one of the programs we offer is Talk Saves Lives. It's a general program that gives information about suicide prevention and mental health awareness, statistical facts about research that we've done about suicide prevention and the suicide rates in the United States, but also providing the training that we do within communities called Safe Talk. That one's more of a higher step to just your typical information about suicide prevention. It actually gives an idea for those participating in that program to role play, to have how to have conversations, what specific signs to look for, and how to handle situations for them to be that connector to get them connected to the resource they need.
There was a teacher that saw in me potential that I didn't even see in myself, was willing to bend over backwards to help me face the challenges that I was dealing with, and also push me down a path that would lead me to creating some form of success for myself.
We've also seen incredible programs here in our local community. Love for Lawrence is a wonderful organization that has done a lot to reduce stigma. Tampa Bay Thrives has done a lot of campaigns and research to understand why stigma exists and how to change the conversation.
We can educate young people about the stigma of mental health, but really just introducing them to mental health in general. With the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, we do have programs that we can facilitate to all age groups, whether it's elementary, middle, or high school, and even college. We do a lot of our funding goes into research and just creating programs for us to be able to facilitate. So for example, for elementary school students, we don't necessarily talk about suicide, but we talk about mental health in general. And one of the programs that we offer with our organization is Gizmo's Possum Guide to Mental Health Awareness. It's facilitated with a talking dog, so kids love dogs, and it just kind of gives them an opportunity to be self-aware about their own thoughts and their own feelings, and also being able to talk about their own thoughts and feelings, because a lot of times kids don't really like talking about their feelings or even showing feelings when it comes to struggles like that because they don't understand or know how to. With middle schoolers and high schoolers, we do have a program called It's Real for Teens Mental Health and Suicide Awareness. It's facilitated to teachers and parents in schools, so that way they understand how to talk with their adolescents, especially during that age group, and being able to open up that conversation with their potential child who's struggling.
At the end of the day, it's really all about changing that conversation, moving mental health from something that isn't real to something that is real, And how do you talk about mental health, and how do you support each other in making sure that folks have the resources that they need to promote the best mental health possible? Our media is an amazing vehicle for distributing information. And certainly when we talk about fictional types of media, TV programs or streaming services or things like that, when those types of media portray an individual with mental illness in a negative light, all that does is to perpetuate the stigma that somehow somebody with a mental illness is dangerous or is scary or is out to hurt people.
So media plays a big role in the perception of mental health in general. Now that we've had a lot more people be more aware to their own feelings and their own struggles. So for example, with the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, we've collaborated with a lot of musicians to help promote having that awkward conversation that people just don't want to have. So for example, we collaborated with Billie Eilish, Papa Roach recently. We even collaborated with Megan Thee Stallion, talking about their own feelings and not being afraid to reach out for help. So media has played a big role, especially with musicians, and they obviously have a big influence in our community.
But when media embraces mental health and really shines a light on how an individual's mental health can impact them and the community, both positively and negatively, I think that really changes the conversation. When we move and villainize and make individuals with mental health issues villains, as opposed to regular people, just like you and me, just like any human, it really continues to perpetuate the stigma that's out there. When we think about mental health in specific demographic groups, we know that, for instance, youth, teens, young adults, they have embraced their mental health journey. They are much more apt to talk about it than older generations in their 60s and 70s, who are still struggling with thoughts of that mental health is actually real.
Statistically, males have a higher suicide rate compared to women in the United States. Every single year, 700,000 people die by suicide. That means every 40 seconds, somebody dies by suicide. With the high risk of men in general, it's the masculine. You're not considered masculine if you feel like you're struggling with suicide, and that's one of the things that it's very hard for men to talk about. But one of the things that we can do to break the stigma is just having a simple conversation, letting them know that, hey, you might be feeling this way now, but it won't feel like this forever. And just having that conversation with them of letting them know, hey, I'm here to talk for you. It's okay to talk. Let me go to that dark place with you to have this conversation with you to help you through this.
I think that the other place where these demographics really impact are individuals who view themselves as helpers versus helpees, veterans, military, first responders, individuals who see themselves not able to ask for help as if that's a weakness. So really helping to change those dialogues will go a long way in helping to, again, reduce the stigma from these specific groups in reaching out and asking for help. Mental health stigma can impact treatment outcomes in a variety of ways, specifically when individuals choose not to follow their treatment regimen, whether that's medication or therapy.
And that stigma especially around therapy, is debilitating. And I experience it in my family with an unwillingness to pursue therapy. I have experienced it with employees of mine who quietly struggle, and it diminishes their ability to, act at work. And I've experienced it with friends.
The reluctance to ask for help. So someone who is maybe seen as someone who's very strong and has it all together, they don't want to break that shell, and are reluctant to ask for help. And within these open conversations that we're able to have, if someone's able to seek help through a therapist or some other avenue, then you can ask for the help. You can feel comfortable. It's normalizing that conversation around suicide, around mental health, about not feeling okay, and knowing that they're not alone.
You can have individuals who, may start on a medication regimen, and once they feel better, they stop taking it because they have the stigma in their head that this medicine's not really helping me. Maybe it's a crutch. It can also impact when an individual is provided with a treatment plan to help them get to better, and they only maybe do 1 or 2 things on that treatment plan and then get frustrated because things aren't automatically better. That's another result of stigma, that just by taking a medication or just by doing 1 or 2 things, you're magically going to feel better. Just like when you're physically sick, it may take a longer time for your body and your mind to react and change through the treatment process. And oftentimes stigma can really, unfortunately embed itself in that response, meaning that an individual may say, oh, forget it, I'm never going to get better, because of a stigma that's in their head that treatment doesn't work. We know scientifically that treatment for mental health issues, whether it's mental health, substance use, any kind of behavioral health issue, treatment we know does work, but it's not going to work overnight. And those stigmas, those stereotypes will oftentimes, unfortunately, self-sabotage individuals in stopping treatment before it has run its full course. And so that is why, another reason why, reducing stigma is so very important, helping individuals understand how the treatment process works and to expect slides and setbacks in the treatment process, but not to give up on treatment.
The role that mental health professions have in combating stigma is essentially they're a lifesaver. Having that conversation and that professional training to be able to talk to somebody through their struggles is essentially a lifesaver.
Mental health professionals are really key in helping to combat stigma by making the mental health conversation just that, a conversation. Bringing light to issues around mental health and substance use versus keeping it in the dark. Mental health professionals are uniquely positioned to be able to have and lead conversations in schools, in communities, in centers of worship, in having these kinds of conversations to help folks in these environments feel comfortable in having conversations around mental health.
So there's a lot of campaigns and programs that we've done through the American Foundation for Suicide to reduce the stigma and also suicide rates. One is called Seize the Awkward. It's just a little program that we put on to have people understand to have that awkward conversation with students, so hence Seize the Awkward, because every single teen is awkward, but also with Project 2025. And then also just in general, we offer a lot of virtual programs online.
We can absolutely point to amazing examples in communities where community groups have truly taken the ownership to reduce stigma. Love for Lawrence has certainly done that in the communities in the Tampa Bay area by providing different forums and having individuals who have struggled with thoughts of suicide, depression, anxiety, talk about their journey, giving them an opportunity to give voice to their story. Tampa Bay Thrives is another organization. They have an amazing campaign, If You Know, You Know, and it really is engaging regular individuals, regular people in the community to talk about their journey of mental health.
Talk Saves Lives is one of our big programs that we facilitate virtually, or we could do it in person. We've also had Safe Talk. We've also had, for specifically the African American and Black community, Let's Save Lives. That program was specifically designed by African American leaders in the community, and we just started facilitating that program this year.
Anytime we have organizations that are willing to say to the community at large, mental health is real, you have a place in this community, you have a seat at this table, there are discussions that we all want to have to understand your journey. Being accepting and being open are just some amazing examples of right here locally where those dialogues are changing. I also want to say that our local law enforcement has really changed the dialogue, both for the community as well as internally with their own staff. You hear oftentimes from Chief or Sheriff Chronister to Chief Burkhall with Tampa Police talk about it's okay to not be okay. Hearing our leaders, particularly our law enforcement leaders, saying those words has come a long way in helping individuals recognize that I don't have to be okay all the time, that I can feel the way I feel, and that's okay. What's not okay is not reaching out for help. And I think that those activities and those initiatives have really impacted many individuals in our community be able to feel more comfortable reaching out and asking for help.
The biggest role that an individual can do is go talk to their state representatives, their local politicians. One of the big things we do in our organization is advocacy. Every single year in June, we gather a bunch of volunteers, whether if it's board members for each local chapter or just simple volunteers in the community who has been affected by suicide. We take them up to DC and they go around for about a 3-day period talking to every house representative and every constituent, really advocating for the mental health caucus. But locally, what they can do is every single February, there's also a state capitol day that everybody goes up to Capitol Hill and does the same thing locally in their state instead of in DC.
Some of the campaigns that on a national level that have reduced mental health stigma by far has been mental health first aid. Mental health first aid is an evidence-based training that is provided to individuals and groups to help the community understand what mental health is and what it's not. That has come such a long way in reducing the stigma and stereotypes that many individuals have. There's also been a lot of local campaigns through Love for Lawrence, which really placed a face around suicide and mental health. The Tampa Bay Thrives, but there are other communities as well. Tarpon Springs embraced a mental health awareness called trauma-informed care and creating trauma-informed communities so that the entire community would know what to do when somebody was struggling, whether it's a child in school or it's an elderly person in a grocery store, really creating the environment of inclusion and support. So those are just a couple of amazing examples that we have seen recently across the nation, but also in our community.
Well, one of the biggest policy changes that we've had was the support and the approval of our 988 crisis hotline that we've offered for the community. That was one thing that we fought for many, many years, tooth and nail for, and it was officially approved last year to be able to be a big resource for every community.
Policy change is the ultimate acknowledgement that something is real. And I think from a community's perspective, when our community leaders, people who we have voted into office, when they not only create new policies that promote and treat mental illness issues, mental health issues, that really sends a message to the broader local community that this is real.
The 988 hotline is essentially an emergency hotline for those who are in a crisis situation. Essentially, like when you dial 911 for a medical emergency, 988 is for a mental health emergency.
I also want to say locally, what we have seen our county commissioners do, city council, really embracing the opioid crisis and creating just incredible opportunities to provide very unique responses to the opioid crisis has been, I think, so telling in moving the idea of addiction from being something that is that you somehow are choosing to become an addict versus recognizing it for the disease state that it is. Placing things like needle exchanges into our community, offering just non-traditional medication-assisted treatment options, really supporting families and individuals in this treatment space. We never would have seen this 10 or 15 years ago. So I truly believe that when the politicians and the political body embrace a concept like mental health, it goes a long way in helping to, again, shed light in an area that has been in the dark for much too long.
Employers can support a better environment for those with mental health issues is one, building that rapport and that relationship with their employees. I know specifically Pinellas County Schools, or really a lot of county schools in this area, is mandating every single teacher and every single staff member in school to get trained in the mental health suicide prevention training. So that's one of the biggest steps that we can do is one, having that training facilitated so that way they have a better understanding, but also just building that relationship with somebody in the workplace and having that conversation with them and just being real with them if they notice anything is different about their employee.
The words that we use and the things that we say go a long way in either perpetuating that stigma or reducing that stigma.
So language has a huge role in perpetuating stigma and just suicide in general. One of the biggest things that we really advocate for is when somebody has died by suicide, we say died by suicide. When a lot of the common terms that have been used before is commit suicide, and we want to steer clear from that word commit because it puts it in the connotation as being a negative thing and very judgmental. When you commit something, it makes you sound like a criminal, and we don't want people to feel bad about themselves. We want people to address that this is a real thing, that they died by suicide. Safe language is a huge factor when we, in general, are talking about suicide.
Certain generations have certain phrases that unfortunately continue into society today. Words like cuckoo oftentimes had been utilized to describe somebody who was struggling with mental illness. It can oftentimes be hard to get rid of that vernacular, particularly if you've used it for many, many years. However, when younger generations correct their older counterparts, when a teenager corrects grandpa for using inappropriate language or language we wouldn't use today, that goes a long way. Conversely, when we move from using negative language to language that recognizes individuals can experience a mental health issue without being mentally ill themselves, that's a real language shift. Asking what has happened to you as opposed to what's wrong with you. That's a shift in language that helps an individual see themselves as this whole person, but who may be struggling in this one place, as opposed to identifying themselves only as somebody who has a mental health issue. It does go a long way in helping individuals recognize that they are complex individuals, that they have lots going on, but this one thing in their life that's happening right now does not define who they are. That's the power of language, both on the positive as well as the negative. As the president and CEO for the Crisis Center of Tampa Bay, anybody out there, please know that you don't have to face your crisis alone. Crisis is just somebody who has a life's problem and you need help finding a solution. Please partner with us. Do that by calling 211 or 988. Both of those numbers are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, or go to our website, crisiscenter.com. Truly, nobody has to suffer alone. There is somebody on the other end of that phone line 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And our sole job is to believe you, is to connect with you, to help you get to your place of better, whatever that looks like. Please give us that honor. Give us that opportunity to help you find a better place.
As stated earlier, the stigma around mental health issues is reducing, but we must all do our part to continue this trend. Help others around you feel seen and listened to. Stand up for those around you who are unable to help themselves or who aren't receiving the help they need. Don't just be a friend, be an ally.
Anybody can be a lifesaver just having a simple conversation with somebody who's struggling.